Hello, grade sixes. Welcome back to the BFG. And sorry, but you have to listen to me again today. I think I have to clarify, or correct, I should say. Yesterday I said something about Brady and Elias being in their house coats. I think they refer to them as robes. Girls wear house coats, I think. So don't be offended, guys. Your robes are stunning, and we hope you are joining us in your robes today again. Hopefully everyone's with us. Natalia, Jackson, Reese, Benson. Who else have I missed? Taylor, Rhett. Everybody there? Zoe? Yeah, is everybody there? Laura? Okay, here we go, guys. We're going to finish off the chapter we started yesterday. And again, I will have you follow along so that you can see. Alrighty, so we had left off, and I'll just reread kind of the last few lines from the day before. So Sophie promises, I won't tell a soul. BFG says, I is trusting you. He closed his eyes and sat quite still for a moment while Sophie waited. A dream, he said, as it goes whiffling through the night air, is making a tiny little buzzing, humming noise. But this little buzzy hum is so silvery soft, it is impossible for a human being to be hearing it. Can you hear it? Sophie asked. The BFG pointed up at his enormous truck wheel ears, which he now began to move in and out. He performed this exercise proudly, with a little proud smile on his face. Is you seeing these? He asked. How could I miss them? Sophie said. They maybe is looking a bit preposterous to you, the BFG said, but you must believe me when I say they is very extra usual ears indeed. They is not to be coughed at. I'm quite sure they're not, Sophie said. They is allowing me to hear absolutely every single twiddly little thing. You mean you can hear things I can't hear? Sophie said. You is deaf as a dumpling compared with me, cried the BFG. You is hearing only thumping loud noises with those little earwigs of yours. But I am hearing all the secret whisperings of the world. Such as what? Sophie asked. In your country, he said, I is hearing the footsteps of a ladybird as she goes walking across a leaf. Honestly, Sophie said, beginning to be impressed. What's more, I is hearing those footsteps very loud, the BFG said. When a ladybird is walking across a leaf, I is hearing her feet going clumpety, clumpety, clump, like giant's footsteps. Good gracious me, Sophie said. What else can you hear? I is hearing the little ants chittering to each other as they scuttle around in the soil. You mean you can hear ants talking? Every single word, the BFG said, although I is not exactly understanding their language. Go on, Sophie said. Sometimes on a very clear night, the BFG said, and if I is swiggling my ears in the right direction, and here he swiveled his great ears upwards so they were facing the ceiling. If I is swiggling them like this and the night is very clear, I is sometimes hearing faraway music coming from the stars in the sky. A queer little shiver passed through Sophie's body. She sat very quiet, waiting for more. My ears is what told me you was watching me out of your window last night, the BFG said. But I didn't make a sound, Sophie said. I was hearing your heart beating across the road, the BFG said, loud as a drum. Go on, Sophie said, please. I can hear plants and trees. Do they talk? Sophie asked. They is not exactly talking, the BFG said, but they is making noises. For instance, if I come along and I is picking a lovely flower, if I is twisting the stem of the flower till it breaks, then the plant is screaming. I can hear it screaming and screaming very clear. You don't mean it, Sophie cried. How awful! It is screaming just like you would be screaming if someone was twisting your arm right off. Is that really true? Sophie asked. You think I was figgling you? It is rather hard to believe. Then I is stopping right here, said the BFG sharply. I is not wishing to be called a fibster. Oh no, I am not calling you anything, Sophie cried. I believe you. I do really. Please go on. The BFG gave her a long, hard stare. Sophie looked right back at him, her face open to his. I believe you, she said softly. She had offended him. She could see that. I wouldn't ever be fibbling to you, he said. I know you wouldn't, Sophie said, but you must understand that it isn't easy to believe such amazing things straight away. I understand that, the BFG said. So do please forgive me and go on, she said. He waited a while longer and then he said, It is the same with trees as it is with flowers. If I is chopping an axe into the trunk of a big tree, I is hearing a terrible sound coming from inside the heart of the tree. What sort of sound? Sophie asked. A soft moaning sound, the BFG said. It is like the sound an old man is making when he is dying slowly. He paused. The cave was very silent. Trees is living and growing just like you and me, he said. They is alive. So is plants. He was sitting very straight in his chair now, his hands clasped tightly together in front of him. His face was bright, his eyes round and bright as two stars. Such wonderful and terrible sounds I is hearing, he said. Some of them you would never wish to be hearing yourself, but some is like glorious music. He seemed almost to be transfigured by the excitement of his thoughts. His face was beautiful in its blaze of emotions. Tell me some more about them, Sophie said quietly. You just ought to be hearing the little mices talking, he said. Little mices is always talking to each other, and I is hearing them as loud as my own voice. What do they say? Sophie asked. Only the mices know that, he said. Spiders is also talking a great deal. You might not be thinking it is spiders. Oh, sorry. You might not be thinking it, but spiders is the most tremendous natterboxes. And when they is spinning their webs, they is singing all the time. They is singing sweeter than a nightingale. Who else do you hear? Sophie asked. One of the biggest chat bags is the cattle piddlers, the BFG said. What do they say? They is arguing all the time about who is going to be the prettiest buttery fly. That is all they is ever talking about. Is there a dream floating around in here now? Sophie asked. The BFG moved his great ears this way and that, listening intently. He shook his head. There is no dream in here, he said, except in the bottles. I has a special place to go for catching dreams. They is not often coming to giant country. How do you catch them? The same way you is catching buttery flies, the BFG answered, with a net. He stood up and crossed over to a corner of the cave where a pole was leaning against the wall. The pole was about 30 feet long, and there was a net on the end of it. Here is the dream catcher, he said, grasping the pole in one hand. Every morning I is going out and snitching new dreams to put in my bottles. Suddenly, he seemed to lose interest in the conversation. I is getting hungry, he said. it is time for eats. And that is the end of this chapter. I'll give you a hint. We're moving on to the famous Snoscumber chapter, one of my favorites. And I want to remind you how big the BFG's ears are. But man, they were pretty darn useful, eh? Okay, we're leaving it off there, guys and ladies. Until next time, the BFG will be waiting here for you.